Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult video 146. Irreligion and atheism are not the same thing. I figured I'd do a standalone video on this particular topic. I've spoken of it before, I think outside of the Occult playlist, but it's an important topic that needs to be spoken of in light of political events that are happening now, as well as just common sense in general. You may have seen the new sort of howling of people on the far left, that the United States is becoming, for example, an atheistic nation. Religion is in decline. What they're not realizing is that irreligion and atheism are not the same thing. If somebody, if for legal purposes I was asked to document what my spiritual leanings were, what my religion was, I would mark down irreligious. I'm not a member of any particular congregation. But that doesn't mean atheist. They're two totally separate things. I've spoken before of the trifecta within the spiritual world. The first is whether you do or do not believe in a god or gods, or you don't care, so, you're agnostic, something like that. That would be atheism versus theism. You believe in a deity or deities, you're a theist. You don't believe in them in a more hardened fashion, you're an atheist. You're not sure, you're an agnostic. You don't care, you're an apatheist. That's one lexicon within spirituality. It has only to do with the presence or absence perceived of deities of one sort or another. Most religious people, by the way, that are also theists, they believe in one deity to the exclusion of others. They either relegate all the other deities to demonic or evil status, or they don't believe they exist at all. Most Christians do this. They believe in the Christian God, but if you ask them, oh, do you believe in Ahura Mazda? Do you believe in one of these other sort of pagan figures? No, that's just a bunch of nonsense. It's folk tales or something. Then there's spirituality. You can be spiritual or you can not be spiritual. It's essentially, there's no real anti-spirituality. I suppose some people would take it quite far against what they would perceive of as superstition. But it's really just a belief or not belief in spiritual things. Things that go beyond science, beyond rational explanation. Then there's religion and irreligion. I am totally irreligious. In fact, I'm anti-religious. I think organized religious bodies almost invariably are a negative thing. Where they're not outright negative and totally evil, they're at best neutral. This includes congregations within paganism. I consider myself, for spiritual reasons, essentially a pagan. I practice the occult. I see occult orders and groups like that as negative forces in the world. I'm totally irreligious. So I can remain apatheistic. The theism question doesn't matter. The spiritual question is, yes, I'm spiritual, but I'm totally opposed to organized religion. Now, for political purposes, irreligion and atheism are almost entirely conflated with one another by people who want to inflate the popularity of atheism. They don't want to prop up the popularity of irreligion, which is the actual significant force within the Western world. Something like 15% of the population now, including some people who are marginally members of organized religious movements, are technically irreligious. That is, they have a specific doctrinal belief that goes in line with something like Catholicism or baptism or Islam or something. But at the same time, they don't belong to those bodies from which they take the dogma. They've become irreligious, but it doesn't make them atheists. It doesn't mean they're against or don't believe in those elements of spirituality. It simply means don't belong to a religious congregation, or they're only on the margins of it. For instance, there are a lot of social Christians who they go to church on Christmas and Easter. They believe kind of in the God, but ultimately they're not religious individuals. They don't go in every week and pray for hours. They're Muslims. They don't do the Hajj and the prayer and stuff like that. It's very cultural. And this would be a significant and increasing minority, at least, within almost all religious forces in the world. I see that, by the way, as a good thing. This is like a golden era sort of stuff. Having a cultural religious belief, being a cultural Christian, a cultural Muslim, whatever, is perfectly fine. These individuals tend to be quite sane. They're rational. They fit in with any society they're in because they favor the secular side for governing their daily lives. For them, the religion is of mainly cultural importance. It often ties in with cuisine. You'd have somebody who is essentially a liberal Jew who maintains a kosher lifestyle and celebrates with the Jewish music and everything. But do they take a hardline approach and say, yes, praise Yahweh, I must not do anything on the Sabbath, I must go see the Western Wall, and I must do this and that, all of this legalism? No, because it's not of great importance in their life. Their life is their own. They live it the way they want to. They simply happen to have that cultural belief. There are many people within many religious movements, essentially, who do this. They maintain the core dogma. They maintain the core moral message. They infrequently associate with the religious body, and that's all they do. They are, for census purposes, they would be listed as irreligious. They wouldn't be listed necessarily as Christian or Muslim or Hindu or something like that. And this is probably one of the most important political topics that overlaps with spirituality today, is the concept of atheism and the interplay with irreligion. They often, but do not always, overlap. In my case, they don't. In my case, I've gone past theism versus atheism. It doesn't really matter to me whether there's a deity, because according to the different dogmas and doctrines believed in throughout time, it's impossible for me to determine which of these deities is real unless I take it as a token of faith that one or the other actually exists and has power and importance. But I'm not willing to do that, because that's also a cultural sort of thing. You're born up into a religious movement, you tend to adopt that religious habituation within your life and just assume, yeah, Jesus is Lord, or yeah, Allah is God and Muhammad is his prophet, or yeah, Vishnu created things, or Brahma or something like that. And that's just the way that it works. That doesn't mean you have to be anti-spiritual. You can have very powerful spiritual beliefs. I know that I do. I believe in all sorts of forces and magic and all of these things. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to give money to or follow the dogma of or attain membership in some congregation of pagan occultists, because it wouldn't be worth my time. I'd rather go off and be independent and do my own research into the occult, research the spiritual on my terms. It's much, much better, I think. It's more positive in your life to be more independent. What's the point of trying to gain some sort of divine wisdom if you're not the one doing the searching for it? Why are you taking words written by somebody else and conflating them as some sort of objective absolute truth? This is the case with both modern and ancient religious opinion, by the way. And that's a great point as well, because all of these ancient scribes and writers and authors of the different sort of doctrines and paths within these religious groups, they're simply stating their opinion. For the most part, it's all opinion. It's either opinion or it's mythology. That is, that it's either some sort of mythological, usually begins as an oral system, then written down over time. Some sort of pennings that they made about past events, which often they're far removed from even in their day. This is certainly the case with all of the Old Testament. It wasn't written down until centuries later. A few of the latter-day OT works are closer to have been being contemporary at the time that they were first written down. Those would be, the original 5 books of the very first, like the Genesis and Exodus. They're the furthest removed from being penned down in a contemporary manner. Those are the ones that are considered the most holy, even though they're the most far removed and therefore probably the most far removed from their original intent and meaning. I take them as a bunch of Sumerian tales adopted by the Babylonians and imparted to the Jewish tribes during their time in captivity there. And so you have that. It's all basically opinion. So too would the modern material be. Some occultist living today makes a grimoire, makes a book of occult philosophy. It's their opinion. It's their understanding of reality. But I'm not interested in their understanding of reality. I can refer to it. I can read through it and see what makes sense to me based on my own reasoning. That's about as far honestly as it goes. But it's important not to conflate religion versus anti-religion or irreligion, with theism versus atheism, and with spirituality versus either the lack or opposition to thereof, like a opposition to superstition, saying, oh, these ghost stories, bad stuff, leads people astray from some pure spiritual doctrine or something like that. These are 3 entirely separate things, 3 entirely separate facets of human spiritual existence. And when they're conflated, I think people limit themselves artificially. For instance, they say, well, I realize organized religion is a fraud, so I'm also going to be an atheist and not have any spiritual beliefs. They're locking them into three separate categories. Or they say, oh, I take it on token that there's a God, therefore I must find an acceptable religion and adopt all of its spiritual, superstitious practices. Well, no, you don't have to do that. You can mix and match. You can be an atheist or an apatheist, not really care, and yet remain spiritual. Or you can believe in a deity, but you can be very rational about it and not have any significant spiritual beliefs. As for organized religion, take it or leave it. It doesn't matter whether you believe in a deity, even if you believe in the same deity prescribed by that group. You could believe in Allah and essentially not technically be a Muslim because, oh, I don't belong to any specific Islamic path. I'm just reading the dogma for myself. As for the spiritual beliefs, again, you could take them or leave them. You could have those cultural beliefs from any of a dozen different backgrounds, or you could forsake them all, or you could adopt your own. You could do your own research, your own philosophy on the topic. And this is the wonderful thing about human spirituality. It's much more complex than simply boiling everything down to you either are religious and theistic and spiritual, or you forsake all of these things and you're entirely secular, entirely atheistic, without any religious association. It goes beyond that. That's about all. Peace out.